Have you got a handheld radio with a bent antenna? Can you straighten that antenna out, or will that antenna work perfectly fine when it's bent? Well, stick around. I'm going to cover this topic in this video. Hi, Steve here, and welcome to K4SRF Ham Radio. Have you ever purchased an HT or handheld radio, ham radio, or it doesn't really have to be ham, it can be GMRS or FRS or anything else, just a ham radio, and you've noticed that after a few weeks the antenna is bent, or maybe you've thrown it in the car, put it in a backpack, and the antenna gets bent. Is that antenna still any good? Can you still use it? Will it still work? Well, obviously, if you can still make contact, still hit that repeater, people can still hear you clear, there's no problem with your modulation, your audio, then of course it still works. And maybe it's just you just don't like the looks of a bent antenna. Well, I know what you mean. I know how you feel, because I've got a couple of radios here that have antennas that are a little cockeyed and a little bent and a little wonky. They still work fine. The radio still works fine. I got still all the repeaters and everything, but I like a straight antenna if possible. I don't want one that looks like it's been put through the ringer. Now, obviously, the rule of thumb is usually when you buy an HT antenna, or the HT radio that is, the first thing you do is replace the antenna, the stock antenna that came with the radio, that rubber deck, mainly because they don't work as well as another alternative antenna would. And for the most part, that's true. Now, some of the higher end radios like ICOM and Yaesu and all them, their stock antennas work fairly well, for rubber decks and for factory included antennas. They do perform rather well, in fact. But sometimes if you're going to be in a location like in the parks or out wandering around, walking around, you want to have a larger gain antenna, you should replace that antenna. Now, to give you an idea, on some of my radios, like my Kenwood here, I do have a signal stick that I put on here. I do have the larger signal stick. That is just what I use when I'm out in the field with this particular radio. And I know we're talking about bent antennas, but we'll get to that. I do have a diamond that I have on this particular anytone right here that I'll use. And you can see it's a little bent too, but this particular diamond, all you have to do is just basically straighten it out. It'll straighten pretty much out. This thing can get really bent. I've had that thing really bent before. Now, on another anytone I've got here, I've got this Nagoya antenna. It's rubber in nature, but it also is quite flexible. It won't bend. What's causing the bend is the memory in the antenna itself, and all antennas are going to have this memory built up after a while if you've used your radios on a regular basis. Now, I am still using on my ICOM 52A, I'm still using the stock antenna that came with it, and this is the antenna in particular. It's a heavier rubber stock antenna. Works very well on this radio, and I use it basically for my everyday antenna. I will swap out the antennas on this radio if I'm going to be out in the field somewhere, or someplace where I want to be able to reach out more. And this antenna, it's pretty much straight now, but this antenna will get a bend in it after a while. It's still got a little bit of a bend, and I was wondering, it worked fine. There was no problem, but I was wondering how I could go ahead and straighten this antenna out and keep it as straight as possible. Now, obviously, there's some things that some have suggested that you can do that won't work. For one, take this example. You don't want to put it in boiling water. Boiling water will really kind of destroy the antenna itself. If it's got adhesive on the inside, it's going to melt the adhesive. Another example was using steam, and by using steam, you can heat the antenna up somewhat on the outside. It won't get as hot on the inside, and sometimes that works a little bit to take a little bit of the kink out, but you have to be careful, because in either boiling or steaming, you're going to hurt yourself, and in either one, there's a risk of destroying the antenna. Now, Another idea that somebody had once is to warm it up in a microwave. Now, obviously, you don't want to do this because the interior of the antenna, you got wires in that antenna, and you know what wires, metal and microwaves do not match at all. So you would totally destroy your antenna in that microwave, probably damage your microwave as well. So what do I recommend you do? What do I do to straighten out an antenna? Well, basically, I just stick it out in the sun. I let the sun outside warm it up for a while, a few minutes, 10 minutes, something like that. Then I'll take that antenna and I'll place it between two books. And by placing it between two heavy books, they don't have to be massive books, but they're heavy enough, with the antenna mount poking out in the small end of the antenna in between the two books, and just let it sit there until it cools down. Now, that'll basically straighten your antenna out all the way. Now, going back to what I said previously, antennas that are bent will work. And at some point, though, you may want to go ahead and replace an antenna. So, with the antenna costs nowadays, they're not that expensive. So, if you really are worried about a bent antenna and yours really gets bent out of shape, instead of trying to manhandle it, just go ahead and replace the antenna. You can get those for a reasonable price, and it would probably save you a lot less grief. In fact, sometimes I may even buy, if I like the particular antenna, I may even buy an extra one just to have as a spare, because things happen. You can drop your radio, you can slam the antenna. If you've got one of the long antennas like the signal stick, like I said right over here, you got something like the long signal stick, and these are great because you can tie these in knots or whatever. But if you have a signal stick or some long antenna, some 15, 16 inch, 20 inch antenna, and, you can slam it in the door or something like that and really put a kink in it or something like that. You may damage the internal wiring in the antenna itself. So get a few extra antennas. They're not that expensive in the realm of things, and always feeling regret for not having that extra antenna when you need it is something that I think about. So I'd rather have an extra and be safe than whatever. So if you do use a stock antenna like I do on one of my radios here, and it does get bent, don't worry about it. Just, you can straighten it out some with your hand a little bit, kind of straighten it up a little bit like that, and as you go along throughout the day. These things are going to get bent. Either the ones you get from Nagoya or Diamond or Comet or Signal Stick, they're going to get bent at some time, but a bent antenna usually works. So, in conclusion, there's really no way to permanently fix a bent antenna. It will always have some little bit of memory curve to it if it does get bent, but it's just the looks. They'll still work. So, tell me, if you ever had a bent antenna that didn't work or got broke somehow, what did you do to your antennas to fix them, or did you just go ahead and replace it? Leave the comments below. And if you haven't subscribed already, go ahead and subscribe and click that bell to be notified of upcoming videos. Well, until next time, this is Steve, K4SRF, and we'll catch you on the air.